So to begin with, these are the two sprues that are there inside the box. The first sprue has the fuselage halves, the different nose halves that are there, and the second sprue has the wings, the drop tanks, and the elevators. Moving on to the decal sheet, it's got the markings for the Italian Air Force, the Greek Air Force, and the Frecce Tricolori markings. And then it has the simple instruction sheet with some information written in the front and the paint guides at the back, and followed by the assembly instructions with a total of 3 steps for the total assembly of the aircraft. The instructions also show the assembly of the 2 different noses of the attack and the reconnaissance version, and I am going to build the reconnaissance version. So I began with the assembly by cutting off the fuselage halves and the wings from the sprues. The overall assembly of the kit was pretty simple and straightforward, and I should say that it just had its usual challenges of cleaning, sanding, filling, and all the other things like that. So as you watch me building the entire kit, let me talk a little bit about the G91. So as has been the case with every successful European fighter aircraft, the doctrine to have a single fighter to fulfill the needs of majority of the air forces in the continent of Europe has always worked. In line with that doctrine, we see the Eurofighter Typhoon today, but back in the 1960s, the G91 design was chosen by NATO as a low-cost, easy-to-maintain and fly, interoperable, lightweight strike fighter for Europe. In 1955, the Fiat G91 was selected from the competition with Dassault Mystère, Northrop F156, and Breguet BR1001 Theon. The G91R Gina went into full production service with the Italian Air Force in 1964, and 144 machines were delivered for service. Apart from Italy, the largest user of the G91 was Germany with 310 machines, and the US and Portugal, which used 10 and 4 respectively for test and evaluation purposes. The G91 is powered by the Orpheus 803 turbojet engine with 5,000 pounds of thrust and has a maximum speed of 1075 km an hour and can carry 4 12.7mm M3 Browning machine guns, 2 30mm DEFA cannons, 80mm rockets, and iron bombs. The last of the G91s were decommissioned in 1995 after nearly 35 years of service. Here you can see me pre-shading the entire aircraft with Camlin Black at a pressure of 15 psi in the compressor, and I must say that the kit is extremely detailed at 1:100 scale, and the panels are recessed, and it has extremely crisp lines. It was then time to color the underside of the aircraft, and I produced this grey color by mixing Fevicryl white and Camlin black color, and it was just a matter of simply eyeballing the mix to the consistency required, and then I started painting at a compressor pressure of about 20 psi, and it was very simple to paint the underside. Here I just kept in mind that I wanted to let the pre-shading show through a little bit, just to show a slight worn out effect on the underside. Once the underside was done, it was time to paint the top side, and with Fevicryl turquoise blue I tinted the grey color that I produced earlier, and it was simply again a matter of just making a subtle pre-shading show through while I maintained the pressure at 20 psi on the compressor and went on painting the top side with the base color. With the base color done and dried up, it was time for me to paint the camouflage pattern of dirty green over the aircraft. And I used my standard method of blue tack masking to make those squiggling patterns of the camouflage. And then I began painting the camo pattern with Fevicryl Olive Drab, which I produced with Fevicryl Sap Green, black and brown, mixed in various quantities to achieve the dark green or the olive drab tone that you see here. And I set the compressor at about 10 psi, brought it really close to the model and started spraying within the blue tack masking boundaries. The idea was to always paint perpendicular to the boundaries and to the surface of the aircraft so that the spray pattern always remains within the expected blue tack boundaries. Once the camo pattern was painted and dried off, I removed the blue tack masking and began preparing the aircraft for the orange paint of the combat training livery, which I had planned to paint the aircraft in. I'll show you a picture of that training livery right here, and that's the scheme that I was going to paint in. And so once the masking was done, I began painting with Fevicryl Orange, which is straight out of the bottle, thinned with IPA thinner, and the compressor pressure set to about 15 psi. And I painted the tips of the wings, the rudder, and the nose section with a little bit of the underside of the nose section in the orange color. And this was the training livery that the G91s were actually painted in much later during their careers. Finally, I used my Della Rowney soluble gloss varnish to put a gloss coat over the entire aircraft once the painting was done. This was a step in the preparation for the decals that will go on after this. So it needs a gloss coat, which I usually use my Della Rowney gloss varnish for the purpose. I simply used a flat brush to paint the entire aircraft with the gloss varnish. And then it was time for the decals, so I used my standard procedure of applying the decals with watered down PVA glue applied to the place where the decals would go. And then the decals were dipped in warm water for about 30 to 45 seconds. And once they became free of the backing paper, they were taken out and slid over the model where they were supposed to go. And then with a cotton Q-tip, I pulled out all the excess water from underneath the decals, and the decals have really given a very nice look to the model. The overall look has been enhanced. And finally, I removed the masking off the canopy, and the aircraft was ready for its final photo shoot and display. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the final finished model, the Fiat G91R Gina from the 51st Wing, Italian Air Force, in the combat training livery paint scheme. A nice little model from Tamiya. I really enjoyed building it. It took me a total of 4 days from start to the finish and to the last step of photography. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next time.